I know we
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the August 7th Portsmouth Community. I'm sorry?
Hello.
Oh, gosh, I'm way behind. What am I looking at? The August 13th meeting of the Portsmouth Community Network Broadband Authority. I'd like to welcome everyone, and especially our newest member, Mr. Ron Green. We welcome you to the authority today. Glad that you can make it and have the willingness to serve. So help us to welcome our newest member. Okay, so we'll jump right into our agenda, and we'll begin with our roll call by Madam Secretary.
Yes, ma'am. Mr. Barnes, absent. Mr. Green?
Present.
Mr. Hugel?
Present.
Mr. Moody is absent. Mr. Tillage?
Here.
Dr. Whitaker is absent. Chair Lucas Burke.
Here. All right, thank you. And we'll move to our agenda with the adoption of our our minutes, and they are attached to this packet that you have. If you have not had a chance to review them, you can take a look now.
To adopt.
Second. Okay, so Madam Secretary, we have the motion. We are calling for the roll.
Yes, ma'am. Mr. Barnes is absent. Mr. Green?
Accept.
Mr. Hugel?
Aye.
Mr. Moody is absent. Mr. Tillage?
Yes.
Is absent. Chair Lucas Burke.
Yes.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Next is our updates and discussions, and the first agenda item that we have for today is the Virginia Digital Equity Grant application, the planning activities, and so I'll turn the floor over to Mr. Cliff Hayes.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair, members of the authority, Mr. Manager, guests. You'll notice that there was a time when we talked about how across the country, throughout the Commonwealth and in our communities, struggling for ways to help deploy broadband and seek funding sources for assistance to try to do so. And now we find ourselves in a place now where funding sources are somewhat plentiful on the federal level, through the state level, and so we're doing all we can to apply for funding sources to assist us in trying to close the digital divide here in the city of Portsmouth. It was, I think, a pretty good strategic move by the city to decide to deploy its own fiber ring here locally, and you'll see how that's beginning to pay off, and we'll talk about some of that during the presentation, as well as the strategic partnerships that the council and the city has made in the region with the regional Southside Network Authority. Pretty much the update today that we provide with regards to the Digital Equity Grant. I think when we left off, we were telling you how we had applied for the grant through the state to help us with our departments and community organizations to help identify any of the projects that were going to be necessary for digital equity, and put those projects forward by getting funding through the digital capacity grants that will be awarded next year. We have received word that the city of Portsmouth was awarded the grant, and so we will have that funding available to us to begin laying the groundwork for us to apply for more funding next spring by creating this needs assessment. The letter or the award, according to DHCD, was July the 31st. We actually received it in hand on August the 6th, letting us know that the city of Portsmouth was awarded this needs assessment tool, funding for the tool to create a needs assessment. Today, earlier today, I think it was 12:30, we had a kickoff call with DHCD, the Department of Community Housing and Community Development, which actually is administering all of this broadband funding. We had a kickoff call with them today to kind of lay out the expectations of us, when we'll receive the actual contract that we'll work with the manager to submit on behalf of the city. And some of the steps involved after that in the process will be next for us to make sure that we create a working group to begin putting together this needs assessment. So that's going to include the consultant that we have with Broadband Telecom, Mr. Biku and his staff, our city IT department, other departments that we have throughout the city to find out what their specific needs might be. And we'll begin having monthly meetings, if you will, to try to put together this overall needs assessment. Then, of course, we're going to reach out to some community organizations as well as some potential partners. For instance, in the way of our departments, we're talking our marketing department, in the way of community organizations and institutions that might become by way of the major universities here, the Norfolk State, the ODUs, VMAS, TCC, Virginia Wesleyan, etc., to try to hone in to what those needs may end up being in the community as well as on the city's part. Our documentation will need to be put together. In other words, over the next 9 months, we'll be gathering that information, and as we get that information, we'll be developing what we'll consider to be a master plan that we will put together on behalf of the city. The regular milestone and reporting to DHCD is a part of the process. So on a monthly basis, we'll have to report to them, whether or not we're on track with the items that we've submitted to them for our application. And so each month we'll have to let them know our progression and how things are going. The first 4 months, we'll be working real hard on the needs assessment as well as GIS demographic baseline and surveys as well throughout the community. The last 4 to 7 months will be going over and defining the digital capacity projects that we have with our partners. And then, of course, the last 2 months will be getting feedback and finalizing our plan. And that should be somewhere around April, May of 2025. Our broadband initiatives, got a little overlap there on this actual version that we have up here. Okay, so we have a survey from June until October to determine the individual facility costs for equipment in our fiber build out, the plan to fund high capacity community anchor institutions. That's what those CAIs are, community anchor institutions. Those will be broken down, those connections will be broken down into our priority locations and then less prioritized community anchor institutions as well. But the initial ones will be the ones that we target initially. So we're talking our city facilities, our police department, fire department, city facilities, our universities, our schools, et cetera, et cetera. July of 2024, following this timeline, the marketing plan was drafted and it was actually approved as we just announced. And then, of course, by October of this year, we move into a different phase. So as we get to October of this year, we begin to look at activating our main circuit for the city here, our data center, and running that down to what we call Global Links. There's a data center in Virginia Beach that has access to the high-speed internet cables that are coming across the coast of Virginia Beach that are coming in there. That has always been a part of the strategy for the city, but also as a strategic partner that we are with the region. It was always the intent that within the region, as a partner of the Southside Network Authority, that part of the strategy there for each city was that the cities would have access to those cables as well. Then, of course, the September time frame, right on around to next spring, we're looking to identify BEAD, the Broadband Equity Access and Deployment Internet Service Providers. So there are ISPs that are interested in applying for BEAD funding. This is a part of that $1.48 billion that the Commonwealth has been allocated from the feds. And of course, with this funding, the city cannot apply for this money directly. We literally have to work through an ISP in order to get the funding to the community. And so it'll be those ISPs or an ISP, however that works out relationship-wise with the city, to actually have them apply on behalf of our community to provide this access to our community. Some of the ones, some of the potential partners we know, right now we already have a working relationship through the Southside Network Authority with the ISP that they've identified and hired is GTS. But there are other players out here who we've been having soft conversations with as well that may be interested in applying on behalf of our community. They would include Metronet, Lumos, as well as Cox. In March 2025, the data center transition is, by that time, we hope to have all of that completed. And by April 2025, the digital equity and marketing plans should be finalized as well. Then, once we've connected those community anchor institutions that are of high priority, we're looking at an estimate time frame of about the third quarter of 2026 through 2028, the lesser prioritized community anchor institutions to go back and kind of connect some of the nonprofit organizations and other organizations in the community with that remaining as a strategy for us. I didn't know, I want to open up for any questions that you might have at this time. I think I saw.
Any members, any questions? Mr. Hughes,
What I
you can
saw
dig
on
in first
facial
and we'll
expression,
circle
like-
around.
Okay, thanks.
Sitting on the edge of his chair.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
So back on the previous slide, the digital equity grant slide, we're going to put this plan together over a 9-month period. What's the ultimate goal? What does success look like? Is this every community in Portsmouth has some minimum standard of broadband access? Is that the measure of success, or it's not clear to me
Right.
what our plan's going to do?
Yeah, and that's why I started out in the presentation talking about how at one point we were, as a, I don't want to say society, but a community here in Portsmouth, the state, the Commonwealth, as well as the country, looking for ways to try to close the gaps where we had unserved and underserved areas, hoping to one day be able to figure this thing out, because we know the demand and the dependence that we have on high-speed capacities, right? Well, I think COVID had a lot to do with this greater emphasis and availability of funding. I know the federal administrations have put all kinds of resources together, as well as the Commonwealth, in the last 4 or 5 years or so. There's been a ton of resources brought forward. So I know it can be a little confusing when we talk about applying for this funding, because there are different sources that we're actually going after. So with regards to this grant that the city just got, that's totally separate and different from what you've heard me talk about in the past with regards to BEAD, the Broadband Equity and Access Deployment Money. Well, these resources that are coming together now is to help with the digital capacity grants next spring. So what we're doing is laying the groundwork over these next 9 months to have a needs assessment to make the case that the city of Portsmouth wants a part of this digital capacity grants next spring when that award comes. And when that award comes to localities around the state, we could see up to somewhere near $1 million if we are successful in doing so. That success with that type of funding would help us with trying to connect community and institutions and help us with that capacity. BEAD funding that we talked about in our communities, those neighborhoods, you recall early spring we were talking about at these meetings having citizens go online and conduct speed tests and to document whether or not they have adequate speeds. Well, that was for neighborhoods. That was for residents. Well, our other focus, well, that's one focus, right, to make sure that the citizens have higher speeds. But also our focus is to make sure that the city itself, our government entities, our community anchor institutions, our schools, our city departments, et cetera, colleges and universities that we have TCC right here, we want to try to connect them. And with that, there's a different pot of money that we're going after to help build our infrastructure here in the city as a part of our fiber ring that we'll be able to offer some kind of connection through negotiations with them. So there are different pots that we're going after with one single mission, which is to blanket the city with higher speeds and greater capacity. So for the long answer to your short question is next spring, that success will look like if we're able to get that award.
Okay. And is this digital equity funding, that grant, is that federal money or state money?
This is state.
Okay. And the BEAD funding is federal funding?
It's initially federal funding that went to each state.
Okay.
And the state is charged with administering it to us. So we
Okay,
can't,
so in both
in other words,
cases, our petition will be
Goes
to the state for basically infrastructure funding for our, and I guess this digital money comes to the city to invest as opposed to BEAD funding that goes to the ISP providers to use.
correct. And it's, I guess, the overall objective or mission is to get it to the community, right? Even though there are two methods of trying to apply for the money. So the BEAD funding, as you noted, the city itself cannot apply directly for that money. It has to be a requirement that we partner with an ISP, Internet Service Provider, and the Internet Service Providers themselves have to file the application. Now, in order for them to get that funding, it looks good on their application. In fact, they get 10 points if the city literally writes a letter along, and they can attach it to their application. They'll get 10 points on their application saying that they're working with the city.
Okay, and so we have,
Can you stick a pen for a second?
Yeah.
So do we know which Lumos or who we want yet, or?
That's an open process right now.
Okay.
The only one that we know for sure, for certain, right now is GTS.
Okay.
Because that's a partner with the Southside Network Authority. That partnership is already there.
Yes.
And we are a 1/5 partner
Yeah.
in that Southside Network Authority. So that ISP, we know, is interested. In fact, we've received a letter from them, an email asking the city to write a letter on their behalf. But we also anticipate that there may be others as well.
All right. Sorry, sir.
so this 9-month study, I guess it feels like we've already done a lot of the homework, because you've shown us in the past the spaghetti chart that shows where the ring goes and what CAIs we're aiming to connect. And so we got a pretty good handle on what stuff we want to connect to our ring. And presumably we got a pretty good handle on what it's going to cost to connect all that stuff to the ring. I mean, the spaghetti chart gives you a pretty good idea how much more fiber you got to run in order to make all the connections, right?
Correct. But the final piece to that is the most important, I think. Well, it's important to identify what you're going to need, but you also need the actual money
Sure.
to connect those facilities. And so through these grants, when we are applying, what we're doing is saying, we've identified our community anchor institutions, the primary ones, we'd like funding. And so we'll be able to say, this is our needs assessment, and this is what it's going to cost us to connect these community anchor institutions. And hopefully, through that process, we'll be looked upon favorably. Those communities that don't go through this process, and they're just saying, we need some money, that's not going to fly. You need to document.
And the CAIs, are those, do they have to be city facilities, or do key businesses, can we label key businesses as CAIs?
Primarily, it's the city or government or colleges and universities, your hospitals, places like that. We have 217 that we've identified. And so we're breaking those into priority community anchor institutions versus less prioritized. So the first initial round, we're trying to connect those. But then once we get all of those connected, the final phase in the third quarter of 2026, I think, to 2028, would be like nonprofit organizations and other entities that would like to come in. Now, a different spoke in order for us to assist with is having a strategy to offer some of the strands of our high-speed fiber. And under those circumstances, we're able to benefit as well. Our economic development department can and has a strategy of trying to offer it and lease some of our fiber to some of those entities that you're speaking of.
So and the reason I'm going down that path is, you said when it's time to put this core working group together, it kind of sounded like it was going to be an internal city working group. Is there a place on that working group for businesses to, as stakeholders in the outcome, or does that?
I would
not allowed
imagine
because
they
it
could
gives
be a
them
part
some
of,
kind of internal advantage or something?
well, I guess, like I said before, the initial part of it is, and strategy is to get us connected, to get the cities, facilities and government entities connected to these high speeds, upwards of 10 gigs connections. When it comes to these working groups amongst our departments, I would imagine some of the businesses could come and be a part of the conversation through the economic development representatives that would be there on that same working group.
Can I throw something in this conversation? One of the things that I'm sure is the groundwork for this, and the reason that we're being forced to use an ISP is so that it don't all go to public. And an ISP is they're going to get money to go to a public organization, but they're going to pass several private organizations on the way there. So they're going to leverage that to make sure that those private organizations that you're speaking about get an opportunity to play in this game also. So the focus is on the public side of this, but the private side is they'll be leveraged the same way anything else. You know, if I'm going to build from here to Miss White, everybody along that route gets to take advantage of it, whether you're public or private at that point.
Yeah, there's that element, you know, having the industry be a part of the network, but I mean, to provide network. But I'm really thinking, if I'm a business that wants to use the network, you know, our ability to entice business to want to come here is going to be in part based on, hey, I'm a high-tech business. I'm thinking about planting in the innovation district, and I look at your spaghetti map and I don't see good enough access in your innovation district, so I'm going to go to Norfolk, or I'm going to go to Virginia Beach, or I'm going to go to Chesapeake instead. And so getting their input into our plan, it seems like it's going to be important so that we got a good plan that encourages businesses to want to plant here and plug into our network, because we've been thoughtful about what we're making available and where.
Yeah, and to that point, as a strategy, the innovation district literally is right in the path of where our local ring is actually going. Okay. So the local ring does run right through that area, and so we'll be able to offer some of those opportunities as our local ring is going right through that area. And as I mentioned before, our local ring, the strategy has always been to connect to the high capacity and speeds of the undersea cables coming in off the coast of Virginia Beach. So it's not just the ring that we've traditionally experienced. We literally will have a 10 gig circuit to be able to offer not only to ourselves, but others will understand what types of speeds that they would be able to benefit from as well. I'll add that we can begin to see the benefits of the strategy that the city made. We've already begun to realize some of that benefit. So in your local ring that you've built around a city, you had to go across, or you didn't have to, but you strategically went across the West Norfolk Bridge. Well, that's our local ring. But running parallel to where we are in the city of Portsmouth is that Southside network they're running a ring around as well. They need to get from around Chesapeake, Suffolk, coming around that side of the city to try to get to the Midtown Tunnel so that they can get over into Norfolk and connect there with that regional ring. And so in order for them to do so, instead of having to apply with VDOT and then also pay permitting fees that would have been in excess, they reimbursed the city for the cost up front that we paid for going across the West Norfolk Bridge. So that 1.2 million that the city invested, the Southside Network Authority recently has, repaid the city for that.
Okay, thanks.
Any other members, questions?
Yeah,
Mr. Green, I'm sure you have questions.
Got tons now.
Yes, yes.
I'll start with the comment first.
Okay.
I think it really is important that we are crystal clear on what we're trying to achieve, to Councilman Hugel's point, because if we don't know what the end is, I believe it's more than just the broadband is out there. I'm making this up, but if it was that we wanted our citizens to have more jobs or different kinds of jobs in the future, and this was an enabling part of that, then that's going to factor in decisions that get made over the next several months and years. But if it's just we want broadband to be out there, we might end up being a little bit more rudderless. So I think it's just important that we figure out what it is that we're trying to, what's the ultimate thing that we're going to try to do, and then this just becomes a way to do that, a technique to do that.
Absolutely.
The question I had was, are there opportunities for us to attract community anchor institutions that maybe don't even exist today, that will only exist because of the broadband ring that is going to be put here? So I understand the importance of reaching out to the organizations that are already here, but is there actually an opportunity to, are there things that get created, and they don't have to be private institutions necessarily, but things that could get created or enhanced that would function as community anchor institutions because of this? And again, that goes back to having that kind of crystal clear strategy of what is it that we're trying to do, and then that might affect how we explore those kinds of opportunities.
Yes, Madam Chair, Member Green, as a strategy, the city also had excess strands that we have included with the ring as well to present those type of opportunities. If something along the way like that actually came up, we would have the ability to do so.
Then final question I had is, you mentioned about ISPs basically being able to buy some of the capacity. Are we seeking out to make sure that we have multiple ISPs, especially for residents, so that there is potential competition and therefore the prices move in the right direction?
Now you talk, Madam Chair, Mr. Green, Commissioner Green, Authority Member Green. We know that once the conversation started about the city having a local ring and connecting to those high-speed cables, and the city having a location in the data center where those cables are coming in, opened up all kinds of discussions and opportunities for us, and has given us multiple options when it comes to ISPs. And so just knowing that this asset is available has been like a magnet for some of those ISPs. And on top of that, even there's been interest even without some of the federal and state funding that's coming for the ISPs to connect communities. Some have invested with their own resources, even without considering applying for BEAD funding. We have some that have already started to reach out in the community, and to your point, that has caused some competition right? And therefore, it's our hope that that would mean for the residents that they would have lower costs with higher capacity and higher speed connectivity.
Good. Okay. Mr. Tillage, you have any questions? I did have one. You mentioned on this page that the grant was approved, and do we know what that amount is, or is that?
24,900, I believe it is.
Okay.
That's to put together your assessment
Right.
and to do some marketing, et cetera, across the community. And so that's what that purpose is for.
And that's an adequate amount to try to get started with that?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
And there only been a few localities so
That have-
far
mhm.
that have received that funding.
Okay.
Other localities now are scurrying because it was good that we got in on the front end of that because it's on a first come,
Okay.
first served basis that those awards will happen.
Right. And I know that we were ahead of the curve with establishing our fiber ring before any of the other 5 localities in the regional ring. So this puts us even further ahead.
Definitely helps.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
Yeah, okay. All right. Well, thank you for that part of the discussion. Are we ready to?
Madam
move to
Chair,
the
we've
next?
actually included and incorporated all of the agenda items in this one
Okay, in one,
presentation.
okay. I thought Mr. Vico was going to come and say something as well.
He's welcome. Y'all have
Did you have
questions?
any additional conversation to add to? Yeah.
So I think I just want to kind of make sure we all understand the difference between the BEAD and the digital equity.
Right.
It's very important.
Yeah.
Okay? So digital equity is not relevant to BEAD. It's not related. It's completely 2 separate lanes that we're going down.
Mm-hmm.
The BEAD funding, of course, like Cliff said, is going to be service provider. We're going to go through, do some soft pulls on the, qualify them as far as what we want to pick as a service provider. But the exciting thing about the digital equity grant is that we get to work with communities that are like the different areas, like you mentioned innovation district. So when we talk about digital equity, it's about having a working group and seeing what innovation district needs. Does it need flood sensors? Does it need cameras for public safety? Is there a high influx of crime there? All the different things that causes a neighborhood to be unserved, right? Not by broadband, but
Right.
basically by population. What can we do to increase that population? And that's what digital equity is. So it's more of the technology, designing the technology, enhancing the technology, and creating an ecosystem that actually enhances these neighborhoods and people and want people to come in and live in. That's what this work group is going to be. So there could be multiple neighborhoods that we're going to do these working groups and put this whole master plan together. And that's what's going to be presented as the application for, the funding for digital equity. So that's it.
And
That's
the,
what
and the
I made.
needs assessments, I know, I remember a conversation in one of our work sessions or city council meeting, and it must have been the meeting because we had public speakers. And one gentleman mentioned that we're focusing on our innovation district with all of the funding that we received, and it's just stuck with me because he said, bring some of that funding to the ghetto, because we need lights there, we need sidewalks there. So I don't know if the needs assessment will identify some neighborhoods or some communities outside of our innovation district where we could spread some of that.
And as we go put this process together, we're going to check with DHCD and see what can be allocated. There's more technologies, and I'll give you guys a perfect example. City parks and multiple parks in Portsmouth have a lot of crime.
Right.
They have a lot of issues. One of the initiatives is to basically, let's see, we can put cameras out there that
Right.
actually can, stop people dumping garbage, stop, things going on in the park itself, and then create a safe environment. This digital equity grant will accommodate a lot of those funds to actually get it done. But that's just one piece.
Just
I mean,
one
telehealth, teleeducation, different things that need, we want to enhance the city, Portsmouth. That's what's going to make it all, come together. So.
And I guess back to the conversation between my member Hugo and Green with the needs assessment, how do we find who the players are going to be to say, I have a need?
So you had mentioned bringing in, like, businesses. Any funding that we have through digital equity is it can involve a nonprofit. So if there's a nonprofit that wants to come in and work with that's providing a specific service, yes, the City of Portsmouth can say, okay, let's add that to our CAI list because it's a 501c3 nonprofit. But businesses for profit are not going to qualify
Right.
for it.
Okay,
Okay.
thank you. Okay, do we have any closed session items?
Okay.
The attorneys? Okay, no? And any new business topics that you would like to hear about, or any suggestions from our staff? Okay. Well, if we don't have any speakers, then our next meeting is scheduled for September 10th at 4 o'clock. And I thank you all for coming. So do we need a motion for adjournment?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right. Well done.